Hello and welcome to episode 126 of my podcast all about knitting and crochet and my yarn shop here in Wiesbaden, Germany. I'm Kiko and today is January 17th, 2022. Today I'm wearing an old scarf or shawl that I knit about 10 years ago, which is huge and big and warm and exactly what I needed today. And I knit it out of two different yarns. As you can see, there's one yarn that's like this section, and then the next bit is a different yarn. And I used a Lana Grossa L tweed for these more colorful bits. And every segment like this is exactly 150-gram ball. And then I knit the same number of rows with this Mohair yarn by Rico that came in a big 200-gram ball, and I held it double so it would have about the same thickness as the other yarn. And then I knit this with a 10mm needle. And yeah, still like it a lot. Sometimes it's a bit too big and bulky. Can't really put a jacket on top, but I still like it. And today it's a cold day, so that's perfect. The pullover I'm wearing today is the Raglano. I knit that about 2 years ago. I think 2 years ago I was in the process of knitting it, and that we knit that as a knit along back then. Raglano is a free pattern by Nicolor, a simple top-down raglan pullover that does not have a V-neck. That was one of the changes that I made, and I used a 6-ply opal sock yarn, and then the beginning everything was just knit in stockinette, and then I chose this little lace pattern for the lower part of the sleeves and also of the pullover. And then this is what the bottom edge of the pullover looks like, and this is a skirt that I knitted many years ago. I don't know exactly how long ago, but this is also sock yarn. I think it was Wollerödel sock yarn, because back then I didn't have the one color opal sock yarn. And the interesting thing about this skirt is the pattern that I used. And I'll quickly show you the book that I got the pattern from, and it's this one. It's called the Big Handcrafts Book, and there's volume 1 and 2. I have volume 1 and 2, and I found that book after my grandmother passed away, and I took it home because I wanted to have it. My aunt later told me it used to belong to my great-grandmother, so it's really old. It says it was published in 1905, and this is the pattern that I used. So it kind of looks like trousers, but it's a skirt. It's just drawn in a way that it's folded over, and in the pattern it says it's an underskirt, and you're supposed to use red wool. It's so funny that they specify the color. Yeah, but that's the pattern that I used. I did not knit the lower edge. I didn't like that so much, and it's knit sideways, and it's you just knit garter stitch and brioche stitch. You change those every so many rows, and then you can add a little something on the top of the skirt. That's what I did. And yeah, and I love this book. It has such funny patterns in it. I haven't knit a lot from them. I think so far I've only knit the skirt once, and then there's a pattern for gloves with half fingers, and I've knit that pattern a lot of times. And maybe I've shown the book before when I showed those gloves. I don't remember, but those are the two patterns that I've knit so far. But I do want to knit more, because I think it's really fascinating to look at these old patterns and figure out how they do things, and to make it work with today's yarns and today's needles. And by the way, funny thing, it says the price is 3 mark, which is so funny. No idea what the worth was back then. No idea what it would be in euros today. Yeah, so that's what I'm wearing. Then on to finished objects. I have 2 finished objects today, and one of them are the fingerless mitts, the Thanksgiving mitts by Romy. I wanted to finish them last week so I could show them today, and then I can give them away on Saturday. And I also brought the other pair that I knit for my cousin. So this pair and this pair, the main yarn is the same. So the yarn that you can see here, that's what I used for these, for this pattern by Stephanie Lotvin. And with this pattern, I added 2 more colors into the mix. And the funny thing is I used the same yarn, I used the same needles, and I also used the same number of stitches. And it's so interesting what a difference the knit purl stitch pattern makes to just knit stitches. So it looks like a different size, but it's not. It's just that if you knit and purl, if you have a knit purl pattern, it will sort of come together, draw together. And then the stockinette stitch, especially when I knit with several colors, it tends to be looser for me. But as you can see, they both fit, so it shouldn't be a problem. And yeah, I hope my cousin is going to like them. So that's that. And then the other finished object is the little hat that I started knitting last week. Well, I showed it as a new project last week, and now it's all finished and it's also washed. I didn't block it, I just lay it flat to dry. And it's the Go Big or Go Gnome hat pattern by Sarah Shearer from Imagine Landscapes. And I'm really happy with it. So I think last week I told you that it's too small for me. So this hat is smaller than my hat, and it's the hat is almost too small for this hat. So the gnomes get pulled out a bit. So this is what the hat looks like without anything in it. So they're not quite as fat as when you pull it apart like this. But I really love the pattern, and I was worried that the hat might be too tall once I finish the gnomes, and it is actually higher than it's called for. So the pattern set to knit less centimeters to get to this point where you start the decreases, but I'm quite happy with the height of the hat. I changed the decreases up a little bit because I had so fewer stitches and I didn't want to increase the decrease rate too quickly. I hope I'm making sense. But anyway, so basically I did the decreases as in the pattern. I just changed the rate of the decreases a little bit. Anyway, I think the gnomes look really nice. And then I told you that this was supposed to be a swatch for a pullover I wanted to knit, and that I was thinking of knitting another hat with one more gnome to make it fit my head. But in the meantime, I realized that I used this, I chose to knit with a 4mm needle because I thought the hat, I wanted it to be quite tight and nice and warm and everything. But then I realized I didn't want to knit the pullover at that gauge. So if I don't want to use this gauge for the pullover, this doesn't work as a gauge swatch. I think I was half done with the hat by the time I realized that. So now I'm thinking about knitting another hat with the same number of stitches, but with a bigger needle, with the needle that I want to use for the pullover. And then it might even be big enough without adding another gnome. So at the moment, I'm thinking I might either use the same number of stitches or maybe just add 1 stitch in between each of the gnomes, something like that. That might be an idea. But it means I have to knit another hat before I can start the pullover. But that's okay, and I'm thinking of using, instead of using the 4-ply yarn held double, I'm thinking of using the 8-ply yarn for the next hat, just to see if it makes a difference. And so I can make up my mind what kind of yarn I want to use for the pullover. So I thought if I do another hat, I can try and change it more than just the needle size. So that's the plan for the next project with this yarn. So that's all the finished objects for today. Then on to works in progress. I'll start as, I won't start with the socks yet. The last couple of videos I kept saying I didn't do any crochet, But that was wrong, and I just kept forgetting about it because on Monday afternoons, I'm teaching a group of students in a school here in Wiesbaden, and most of them prefer crochet to knitting. So a lot of times I sit there and crochet something myself when I'm not helping or teaching. And so I brought some of the things that I did in that class the last couple of weeks. And 2 of them are finished and 2 are not, but I thought I'll just show them in one go. So this is the in between the finished objects and works in progress section for crochet today. So this is a little star that I crocheted out of this book, Tawashi. And this is these are all patterns for little things that you can use to either clean yourself or clean something else. So it's supposed to be for the bathroom and the kitchen, and you can use all these things to basically clean something. This is the pattern that I used for this little star, and you just crochet 2 of those stars and then you crochet them together. And I filled it up partly with this white stuffing. I know there's a word for it, I forgot, but the stuff that you can stuff toys with or gnomes with. But I also put in some yarn ends, so I'm not quite sure whether it shows on camera, but in reality, yeah, here you can see it's a darker color and the different colors peeking through the holes, but that's okay. If I just use this to wash my dishes, it doesn't matter what color it is. This is another little something out of that book, and it's not quite finished yet, so I haven't woven in the last end, and because they're supposed to come I want to add a 3rd color, that's what I'm trying to say, and I always forget to pack the 3rd color, that's why it's not finished yet. And then I crocheted a hat, basically without a pattern, with just a cheap acrylic yarn, but I just wanted to show how easy it is to crochet a hat. And then I increased too many stitches, so it's a bit too big, but then I decreased stitches again, and and it kind of fits, and it's fairly tight, so that's quite nice. But just a little something. And then another project that I've started, I haven't finished yet, is a little could be a little coaster, but it's supposed to be a little mandala, and it's out of that book, Crochet Mandalas. And the pattern I'm working from is this one, and I think the pattern is really nice. The only thing I didn't like was the colors, so I chose to use completely different colors, and I will probably continue crocheting on this today. Yeah, so that's a little bit of crochet that has happened the last couple of weeks and that I wanted to show. But now on to my knitting projects. And as usual, I'll start with the socks. The first pair that I'm still knitting are the Dubai socks by Mina Philipp from Around the World in 8 Socks. That's the Schafpate yarn I'm using, and I have almost finished knitting the pattern. So I put them on sock blockers just to show you. It looks as if it was bigger, but it's not. It's just the perspective. So I stopped knitting on this yesterday because I didn't bring the first socks. I wasn't quite sure how far I needed to knit. And so I realized there's one more cabling to be done and then a few rows in the pattern, and then I can knit the toe. So these should be finished fairly soon. Then the second pair I am knitting are the Zakkuri Remix socks that I test knit before the pattern was published, but now it's published. You can all get the pattern if you want to. And I finished knitting the heel. So it's a toe-up sock, and I finished knitting the heel, and I started the pattern. So I chose with the Zakkuri Remix pattern, you have various options that you can choose from. And with this sock, I chose the option with no cables on the foot, but with all the cables around the leg. So all the stripes are being cabled in the leg part, and I'm using the Hansa Farm sock yarn with alpaca, their old version. And I knew that one of the balls I had already knit something with. There was a little bit missing, and I kept worrying that it's not enough for 2 socks, but every time I put it on the scale, it's still more than half of what I had to begin with. And my plan is probably to knit half of what that ball had, maybe a little more, because this was a full ball and I could use the leftover from that ball to finish the second sock. But so I'm knitting and weighing to see how high I can knit the leg, and yeah, hope to finish the first one soon, and then I can just hope that the yarn will be enough for the second sock. Yeah, and the third pair of socks that I'm knitting at the moment is the Opal Abo yarn. I'm knitting in the pattern battle where everybody is knitting with the same color, but everybody is knitting a different pattern. And I am knitting the Hong Kong socks by Mina Philip, again out of the ebook Around the World in 8 Socks. And I finished knitting the leg. Just a moment. So this is the pattern that I'm knitting both on the front and on the back of the leg. And as you can see, I have started the heel and I've almost finished. It's just a few rows left and then the heel will be done, and then I can knit the foot. The colors are quite interesting. They're not really my favorite colors, except for the turquoise, but the combination of the yellow and the turquoise and the green and the beige is a bit different, but I know that people have different tastes, and I'm sure some woman will be really happy with these socks because I'm going to donate them to the organization who help women with ovarian cancer, and I hope that some woman will be really happy to receive not only these socks but also some help and encouragement and information in her situation, and that's what I'm knitting these for. Yeah, so that's all the socks that I have on the needles at the moment. And I have 2 new casts-ons, by the way, this week, and 2 finished objects, so that's quite okay. And then the next project that I'm knitting out of sock yarn, and again, it's an Opal subscription yarn. It's this one. It's this beautiful color. It's my favorite color in the last subscription box. And I decided to knit the Quadra Cowl. It's a pattern by Martina Behm, and if you've heard me talk about Martina Behm a lot, I think, and she is just a genius with the constructions that she comes up with. And this, so this is what I've knit so far. I think it looks beautiful. And for the Quadra Cowl, you need 200 grams of yarn. So I chose this color, and I want to combine it with a color by Wolldackel. And I forgot to get the yarn, but I'll show you next week. Even if I haven't finished with this part, I'll show you the other yarn, hopefully next week, so you can see the 2 colors that I want to put together. And the thing is, you start out with a square like this, and then the second half is also a square, but in between she does something really complicated and ingenious, and in the end it's going to be a double layer cowl that sort of looks like this, and then this would be the other half, and then the top or the bottom of the cowl would be in one color, and then the other end will be the other color, and then depending on how you wear your cowl, you can either see that color or that color, and then you can even pull it around and play around, and then you can wear it in a way that shows both colors, which is just crazy, but it's fantastic and I love it, and I'm really happy I started this. And my sister is knitting a version with 2 colors of Wolldackel, and another friend of ours has joined in, and she's probably just using Opal yarn. She had picked out 2 colors by Opal, but now she's thinking about changing the other one, so it depends whether that's going to be another Opal color or something else. But that's the Quadra Cowl by Martina Behm. And then the next project, the projects I'm not showing you today, I did not continue knitting on the frog or the hat. I did not knit on the black cardi that's going to get the Wolldackel minis in front. And I also did not add a square to the Memories blanket, just to let you know. But I did knit on the Raglano. So this was my first Raglano with the V-neck. And this is the second Raglano I'm knitting with a rib pattern. And it wasn't supposed to be a V-neck, but it ended up being one, so that's fine. This is another Opal rainforest color. This was also a rainforest color. Both of them are 6-ply, so thicker than the sock weight yarn. And I split for the arms and the front and back. So I put the arm stitches on scrap yarn, and I will continue knitting on the front and back as long as this ball of yarn lasts. And when I've knit all this yarn into the front and back, then I will start knitting the sleeves. It looks rather small, but that's partly because there's a needle in here and partly because the ribbing pulls in. So it's not that oversized. I wanted it a bit oversized. I wanted it a bit bigger basically than this pullover. So this pullover is really not oversized at all. It's really quite close to my body and also the sleeves. And I think from the number of stitches that I have, that this pullover should be wider. So even just looking at the sleeve stitches, you can see those sleeves are going to be a lot bigger than the sleeve I'm wearing at the moment. So that should be fine. So just for the rest of this, it'll be easy going because I don't have to think. I'll just knit and purl without thinking. And as soon as that yarn's gone, I can then start thinking again and knit the sleeves. And then I have another new cast on, and that's another pullover that I started knitting. And this is one where I've had the part of the yarn for ages. And I think I'll start with that. This is Noro Tayo lace yarn. And I have one ball of yarn of that. It's 100 grams and it runs 840 meters. And if the yarn had looked like this in the shop, I would never have bought it. But when the ball was still full, there was this beautiful red color and also this dark bluish color on the outside, and I love those two colors. And of course I could see there's a bit of green and there's a bit of brown, but also there's black and gray, and I thought it's a nice mix, and I wanted to have that. And I knew if I held it double with some mohair, I could get a pullover for myself out of this. And then I bought a mohair silk yarn by Lana Grossa. That was a mix of gray and beige, and by itself, it wouldn't have been a color that I would have liked, but I thought if I mix it with this, and this has some beige and some gray, and then it should be a nice mix. That's what I thought. But I couldn't find a pattern that I wanted to knit. I was thinking of knitting a simple top-down raglan, so I could knit for as long as I have yarn, but it would have meant to cut the yarn to knit the sleeves, and I didn't really want to cut the yarn. And but I wanted to knit the sleeves first so I could knit the front and back for as long as I had yarn. It was difficult, so in the end I ended up doing nothing for years and years. And then some time ago I came across the pattern Pappus. Pappus pullover is a pattern by a Japanese designer. Forgot to write down her name. I'll have to look it up for next week. And that's a pullover that you can knit in one go without cutting the yarn. So the construction is a bit close to the Hitofure jacket that I've knit before. I was thinking of doing that with that yarn, but I did want a pullover, not a jacket. And then when I found the Pappus pullover, I thought that's what I'll do with this yarn. And then two friends of mine wanted to knit the same pullover, and I gave the mohair I had to one of them to use with a different lace yarn. And I decided to use a single color mohair yarn to go with this so it wouldn't be too crazy mixed. And then I debated whether to use red or blue or grey or whatever, and I ended up choosing black. So this is going to be a black pullover with a little bit of colour, and I've had the yarn lying around for months now with the pattern, and I never started. And then last week I finally sat down and decided today's the day that I'm finally going to start the pullover. And one of the reasons I never started is because you have to start with a provisional cast on. I did not use the cast on that's in the pattern because I wanted to try something different. And what I did is I used a different yarn and I knit a few rows, and then I started knitting with my yarn. And you have to do that in 2 sections, same as with the Wichtel jacket. And then that's because when you knit the sleeves together and so on, if you get the pattern, you'll understand what that's for. And this is what I have knit so far. So it's not very high yet, but it's really, really long. And the length is because I'm knitting both sleeves and the upper back at the same time. And this is, so I'm knitting up the back and the back of the sleeves, then I'll do the neckline, and then I'll knit the front of the sleeves and the upper front. And then once I knit the sleeves together in a very genius maneuver, then I can knit the front and back top down for as long as I like, or as I have yarn, or until I hit my ankles. Right now I have no idea how far the yarn will go. I have cast on more stitches than the pattern calls for. In the pattern there are 2 sizes for shorter or a bit longer sleeves, but I wanted the sleeves even longer, so I cast on more stitches. And then also you knit the sort of cuff in reverse stockinette and the sleeve itself in stockinette, and then you do short rows so that this is tighter than the sleeve. It's a very genius construction, and the last bit of the Noro yarn was almost white. So here's the red, and the beginning was with this kind of dark blue-green color. Yeah, and I love it. I love it. I love the way the colors get all muted, and it's almost black, but not completely black. And I knit with a 6mm needle. That's what the pattern calls for, and it's so fluffy and soft, and it's almost see-through. And yeah, really, really excited. I finally got started on that pullover and can't wait to finish it. So that was the second new cast on for today. That brings us to the knit-alongs, and there I have the Wolkig, another Martina Behm pattern. I knit a few centimeters and a few grams. So I weighed the yarn before I filmed, and I have knit about 15 grams, so I have about 35 grams left. It seems the yarn weighs nothing, but it's so soft and it's so nice, and I can't wait to wear it. Even though I want to knit on it forever, now I also want to start wearing it. And it's such a nice color palette. I can wear it with this and with this. Fantastic. Yep, so not a lot happened here. Then with the second knit along, again, I want to remind everybody who's knitting the Rio Calina KAL with me and who's watched my tutorial, please remember that the size I'm giving is too long, so you don't have to knit 110 centimeters. You only need to knit about 86 centimeters. So in the pattern, Cat Body asks you to knit 34 inches and not 44 inches. So please remember that. I put a note underneath the video, but there's no way we could change the video itself. So in the last week, I knit up the second ball of Hansa Farm Alpaca yarn. It's a pure baby alpaca, DK weight. I'm knitting with a 4.5mm needle as the pattern calls for. And as you can see, I did fewer cables with the second ball than with the first one, because that's the part that's going to sit at the back of the neck. And then so I have 2/3 now, and basically this is the width that I'm going to get, because with the third with the last third, I'm going to sew this bit and that bit. I'm going to sew them together, and then they'll be like asymmetric like this. So this will be the lower bit, and then the top part will fold down and will be the upper part. And that's why I said if you've knit too much, if it's too long, it doesn't really matter. You can decide what circumference you want, and you could just sew together a longer seam, and you can still wear it, and the work won't be wasted. So this is the back, cables look different there. That's the plan, so that when you see both sides, you can see a difference there. And as I said, finished the second 50-gram ball, and with the third one I should be able to get the length I want, and then I can film the second tutorial, and then we can all finish our Rio Calinas. Maybe I'm going to cast on a second one straight away, so the knit along won't be over just because I finished mine, because the tutorial will only come out after I finished it, so that I can still knit along with you. I might just knit another one out of opal yarn, because opal yarn is what I love to use. So that's almost everything I did last week. There's one more project I want to show you, and I think I've shown you this jacket before. It's a swirl jacket that my sister knit years and years and years ago, and she gave it to our cousin, and she loved it and wore it to pieces, literally, because this is what the sleeves looked like when she gave it back to me some months ago, and she asked me if I could do something about it, because the rest of the jacket is still okay. It's such a big, huge, fantastic thing, and it'd be a shame to put it away just because of the sleeves. So I fixed the first sleeve, and this is what it looks like now. So it looked somewhat like this to start with, and what I did is I put in a steek. Don't know if you know about steeks, but you can cut your knitting if you do it properly. So I used grey yarn to do the steek, so I could show you. So this is the steek, or this is the reinforcement, and then I cut off the part that was destroyed, and then I picked up stitches from underneath the bit that I crocheted, and I just knit a bit of ribbing. So you can see on screen these colors look almost the same. There's a bit more difference in reality. I think it was basically the same yarn, but because this has been washed many times and this hasn't, they look different now. But I know my cousin won't mind. She'll just be happy to get the jacket back without holes and without it unraveling even more. And yeah, and I wanted to show you this because I decided to do the second sleeve in front of the camera. So I'm going to film a tutorial on how to do a crocheted reinforcement on the sleeve. Then I'll show you how to cut it off, how to pick up stitches. I probably won't show you how to knit the ribbing, because I assume that most of you will know how to knit ribbing. Yeah, so I just wanted to quickly show you that. I'm planning on doing the tutorial, the video this week, so I can give it to my cousin when I see her this weekend. Yeah, and that's everything I wanted to show you today. I hope you enjoyed it, and I'll see you in the next one.